I would now invite Dr. Ravindran for the next talk on how to write the introduction section of a paper.
I'm audible and visible, Latika?
Yes, you are.
Right, you. Okay. So good evening, and thanks to Dr. Vikas and Anand and Latika for putting it all together. So I think we'll just kick on. So whatever type of manuscript you are writing, whatever type Latika has told you, it is important to remember some of the key principles of manuscript writing. And whatever it is, it cannot be done without writing a proper introduction. Before all that, I just wanted to say, when Dr. Vikas was talking about why we should be publishing, going further, why we should be actually focusing on how to write better is because we all are very good clinicians and researchers and do a very good job at sort of looking after our patients very well, but as a group, we are poor communicators and indeed poor writers. We are not taught this skill in the medical school. So as Anand has said, we learn this by doing. But again, some of the bits of manuscript writing is about knowing what it is actually entails, what should be there, and then trying to have a go at it. And whatever said and done, all the parts of a manuscript, typically this is how the manuscript is written. It will have four major components, that is introduction, methods, results, and discussion. And you all know that each of this section asks some questions. Actually, it's the reader which is asking you these questions. Like when you are writing or when the reader is reading the introduction, he is asking, why did you start this study? What was the purpose of writing this piece? Whether it is a letter to the editor or a survey or even an editorial. Then when you're writing about results and the reader is going through it, he wants to know what actually was found in this particular study. So no part of the manuscript is not important. All the parts are equally important. The questions which are being answered are different. So the scope of each section is different. So that has to be remembered, because it is agreed that when it comes to research, it's the methods which is the most important part. You have done it. And then, of course, the logical representation or details of results is very important. But if I were to ask you, if you are just given a manuscript where you have methods and results without the head and tail, I mean, would you not struggle to identify what's going on? So I want you to come sort of move away from this notion that only this segment of manuscript is important. Coming back to the advantage of the format I had just mentioned with four major components is that they are in sequence, so they avoid repetition, because what you have put in the introduction what you have put in the introduction is not going to be there in the methods, and what you have done in the methods is not going to be there in the results. So there is a logical flow of information which a reader can easily understand. I don't know why this things are appearing on my screen. I'm not doing it, but anyway. So anyway, when you are writing a manuscript, there are reporting guidelines which we encourage all of you to go through for whatever type of research or clinical study or whatever you are, or even the review you are trying to write. And the checklist you will find will help you in not missing any of the important components of such reporting. Okay. So coming to the introduction, which is my major brief, as I said, the main components of writing an introduction is to actually answer two questions. That first is why at all you did this piece of research, meaning why at all did you even think of this question, what is called the research question. And what was the reason? What did you identify? Any gap in the published literature? Any lacunae? Any controversies, which led you to look into this particular question? So, in your short piece of introduction, these are the two things you have to focus. So, it is important to sort of have a logical flow of or logical structure in your introduction writing. You will start normally by a short review of the existing literature, and this has to be relevant. And then you can use something called a descriptive funnel. You start with something broad and narrow it down. So for example, you say that rheumatoid arthritis is a chronic autoimmune polyarthritis. And many drugs are used for the treatment of it, which are called disease-modifying anti-rheumatic drugs. And you can sort of say methotrexate, whatever. However, in a proportion of patients, such medicines do not work. So for the last 20 years or so, another group of agents called biological agents are being used. Rituximab is an effective drug to be used in this type of scenarios. However, the effect or the toxicity profile of rituximab in Indian patients have not been studied so far. Of the limited literature which is available, few have pointed out to the increased incidence of, let's say, lymphopenia or some serious infections, while some of the other studies, which are mainly published as an abstract, inform us that that is not the case. So we identified, so this is a broad topic, and slowly we focus down to rituximab in rheumatoid arthritis, and we are specifically talking about the toxicity of rituximab in Indian patients with rheumatoid arthritis. And in this process, we have identified 3 or 4 most relevant studies which have previously tried to address the various aspects which we just discussed in the introduction. We have not, like a thesis, we have not sort of done a very comprehensive review of literature here. We are right from the start very, very focused. And in doing so, in using our descriptive funnel, we have identified a gap in our knowledge. So the gap in knowledge in the example I have given was, we don't know what really happens in terms of the toxicity of rituximab in Indian patients with rheumatoid arthritis. So this will lead on to the question that what are the objectives of my study and how I am going to answer or find, or meet the objectives of the study. So as we say, we zoom in and zoom out. Okay. So the penultimate or the ultimate paragraph would be the hypothesis in your introduction. So you would say that what is the experimental question? So like here in this example, we said, the toxicity of rituximab in Indian patients with rheumatoid arthritis. That will be answered by the present study. If I have a hypothesis, I need to mention it here. And then I need to mention that what approach I am going to say. So am I going to say that if I had planned an observational study, whether retrospectively or prospectively, for the defined length of time, then it has to be stated here. Whether it was a randomized controlled trial I have planned, so that has to come in the last paragraph of the introduction. When you are using a sort of a different type of test compared to the gold standard test, often you will find that the test is actually mentioned here. Just very briefly, because we are going to be discussing in detail about this when you are writing the method section. So if I ask you what should be the ideal length of introduction? So in a 1,000-word manuscript, this cannot be more than 150 to 200 words, or 100 to 150 words. Because if you look at the example of one of the shortest, possibly shortest introduction in the history of medical academic publishing, is actually in front of you. I think there's in 24 or 5 odd words, Watson and Crick in their landmark paper actually set the tone. They just said that we wish to suggest a structure for the sort of DNA. This structure has novel features which are of considerable biological interest. So the principles I have discussed actually can be found in totality here. And I think that is remarkable. So being economical with the words does not mean that actually you are losing the focus and you are not going to convey what you want to do, what you want to convey. Indian manuscripts are criticized for their verbosity. And I think that is the floral language, using too many words are really off-putting, especially when you are writing introduction. So in my checklist of writing the introduction, I would include these. I would check whether I have sufficiently reviewed the relevant literature, because my objective is to make the reader familiar with the subject. And I would check whether in doing so, reviewing the literature, did I identify any limitation, gaps in the knowledge, or any controversy which I plan to address. I will further check whether I have clearly stated the hypothesis or the primary or the secondary objectives of the study. And have I mentioned in brief that what actually is going to be in this study? I mean, whether it's going to be case control study, randomized control trial, or anything else. So when writing the introduction, it is important to remember that a P is missing. So in the past tense, sorry about this, we had to say we did, we carried out, we hypothesized, because the study has been done. So if you look at the research manuscripts, they are all would be in past tense. Very few things, we will, let's say you will say that, we have planned or we are going to do, that will come in the very end of the discussion if you really plan to do something like that. But it is important to always cite past related work by the authors, whether they are from India, whether the study is from India or abroad, it does not matter. Nowadays, see, the gone are the olden days where this type of retrieval of the previously published work was difficult. And then, only few had access to network and the computers and all that. It's not. By sitting here, we can go back 500 years ago and look at the published work. So it's important that the relevant work has to be cited, and always cite appropriately. The introduction is the first part of your manuscript, so whatever acronym you are going to use, you have to expand it here, because so don't count the abstract in here in doing so. So if I don't say that IMA-MS stands for Indian Medical Association Academy of Medical Sciences, a reader would not know what does this mean. And always use short, quick sentences. Avoid using and keep on extending the sentences. It is not necessary. And whatever shape your introduction has taken, you must revise it again thoroughly after you have completed the whole manuscript. And you have to verify whether the final results in the result section, as you have stated, primary, secondary analysis, and in the discussion, your discussion of those results actually tally with what you set out to do in the introduction. A couple of other things. It is important to remember that methods and results are actually a factual statement of things, what has been done and what has been found. In the introduction and discussion, you have some liberty, some literary freedom. I mean, in terms of, your, maybe let's say, command over the language and how you present things and all that. But remember, if you use small sentences and be focused, you don't need to be a major language expert at all. But when it comes to writing methods and results, they have to be. When the editors or reviewers gives you feedback, you will always see that if you left something out in the methods, the reviewer will ask, what is it? What is missing? Why not given? What? Or results. There will be a confusion in reviewer's mind when he will put questions about the results. But introduction and discussion, you will see that the remarks are usually actually too verbose, lacks focus, it's rambling, completely out of tune, it does not match with the objectives of the study. So this is, you have to distinctly address. It is not writing the method and result section. So the feedback related to the introduction and discussion from the reviewers and the editors are totally different from what you get for methods and results. So this has to be kept in mind. And then I would say junk it, unnecessary details and history. Again, I will say that now, not that so much with the now, but many from our countries really, I would say that, like it would start with gout is an ancient disease, which was first described in this mummy, which was found beside the river Nile 5,500 years ago. Completely unnecessary, not required. And long text, I have said enough about it. And then complex sentences. Avoid using complex sentences. Keep it very, very simple. And very simply, your 3 to 4 paragraphs, again, even for sort of risking the repetition, I would say just identify what is the magnitude of the problem, what is the controversy, debate, lacunae or gap in our knowledge, and what you are going to do about it, or what actually you did in your study. And whatever piece you are writing, of the numerous types so beautifully described by Latika, the common principle remains the same. When you write introduction, you are introducing the subject to the readers. You may be knowing a lot about the subject, but that is not the point. Your reviewers may not be often subject expert. It is very difficult now to get good reviewers. And they are also busy clinicians like you. They also spend a lot of time doing clinical medicine and research. So you have to help them in understanding what is actually this piece you have written is about. So George Orwell, I hope that everybody knows. Um, um, these are the principles of effective writing as proposed by him, and I would say this can't be any debate, but I would further sort of identify 3 bits which I recommend everybody. Never use a long word where a short one will do. If it is possible to cut out a word, always cut it out. Don't look at the word count. Don't look at, if your abstract can be 230 words, let it be. Why increase it to 250? So if you're given all the details, what is required in introduction, and it is coming to 150 to 200 words, so be it. And never use a foreign phrase, a jargon, the meaning of which you yourself are not sure. And particularly in English writing, I would advise everybody doing this. Manuscript writing is not a test of your English language skills. So this is very important. Writing clearly in a focused way is completely different from if you read good poetry, or let's say for speaking to English language, if you read good prose in English or good poetry, they are actually highly focused piece. They are not rambling. There is no jargon. That's why you like them. And that's why they have this enduring value. So I sort of, I would like everybody who's attending this webinar to keep George Orwell's principles of effective writing in mind. So I think I've finished. Thank you very much.